So welcome back to this live studio broadcast of Optilon Supply Chain Conference. My name is Sabinia, for those of you who might be joining us now. We've had already discussions in the first part of this conference, which talked about conscious consumers, human data, and also the unredeemed potential of supply chain. We're now going to transition to sustainability, an imperative topic on so many levels. But before we dive into a panel session on this, I wanted to get back to the poll that I addressed to you before the break, and I hope you all feel energized now that you're back from the break. So let's see if we take up the poll and see what you answered. And the poll was, which initiative do you find most important in order to increase your supply chain resiliency? And it's quite, a leveled match here, but I would say mapping of the supply chain in terms of external risk is sort of on par at 28, and then we have initiatives turns towards suppliers, larger local sourcing, and so forth. So there are a variety of things that you find are important to increase your supply chain resiliency. So hopefully we'll get some answers now in the panel. If not, we'll get more answers around this by our speakers later in the agenda. So as we all know, we are all living in challenging times where uncertainty and disruption are soon part of the norm. And it can be tempting to see sustainability policy as a cost rather than an opportunity in the beginning for companies. However, today and going forward, our planet and our humanity require that all companies, all organizations and societies, and even individuals really act with a sustainable mindset and intention. And looking at supply chain and sustainable supply chain, it really starts with being aware of your company's environmental, social, and economic impact. And that is usually abbreviated in the ESGs. So really looking into that, measuring it, and then being able to make the changes required. So to talk more about this, I have an eminent panel with me with three representatives who are going to join me giving three different aspects of sustainability. So warm welcome to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll start with introducing you, Eva. Eva Grönberg Christiansen, you're the founder and CEO of Sustainify, which is, one could say, an independent sustainability data provider and also a measurement of impact that you talk about a bit in a while. And Carl Orling, you are Regional Finance Director at Alfa Laval, but in addition to that, you're also a supply chain and sustainability thought leader, which is important. And then we have Alice Henriksen, and you're a thought leader and advisor and also representing Optilon in that now, and you've also published a book on sustainability responsible procurement. So a warm welcome to all of you. And I thought just to open up, because I was hoping with this panel to really give, the different aspects of sustainability and try to give tools on, how, what, and why to do with fusing sustainability into the supply chain. So just to give sort of a perspective of each of you for the viewers, can you just give me your take on what is sustainability out of your perspective or out of sort of the project where you're coming from? So Eva, if I start with you.
Well, in my view, it's all about the CSR, the corporate social responsibility. It's about companies taking on the responsibility. And we call it the 3 Ps. We measure on for P for people, P for profit, P for planet as well. So the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit.
And Carl?
For me, it's essential for us to thrive as humanity going forward. And I think corporations has to be part of that. And that is more and more recognized among companies. So it's not enough to just, clean your own house. That's of course important, but now we also have to find new business models to support the sustainable transition in society. And that, I think, is really inspiring to be part of.
Yeah, and for me, it's really about going beyond compliance. Because when I wrote the book I think back in 2010, it was very much about suppliers and compliance. But now it really takes a little bit more. It takes actions. And luckily I work for Optilon, and I think the future will include a lot of new technologies to lift this area up with such technologies.
Definitely. And I wanted to maybe dive into the investing aspect of sustainability, because a lot of the time it's also investors who maybe drive the sustainability agenda, highlighting and focusing on which companies are actually creating sustainable impact. And speaking of writing a book, I know that you, Eva, you've also written a book on impact investing. You can tell us more about that. But what would you say, what are investors looking at in terms of assets and in terms of buying companies and in terms of sustainability being at the core?
I think mostly looking for something that isn't greenwashing. There's a ton of greenwashing out there right now, and investors are really scared of it. Nobody wants to invest in something they think is super sustainable, but turns out not to be. So I think that's the biggest threat. And the best tool for that is actually transparency. So investors are looking for transparent companies. How do they report? Do they report on things that they're successful with, but also the things they're less successful with? And then what are they going to do to actually work on that? So transparency is definitely something investors are looking into.
And what would you say, just to maybe clarify, sort of is the distinction between greenwashing and actually having a sustainable agenda?
Yeah, that's a big topic. There is within CSR, when it comes to corporate responsibility, it's about how you make your money. It's not about what you do with it afterwards. So every initiative that is about donating money and something you do to compensate something that you're doing while you're making your money, that's a good way of saying when it's less responsible and when it's really responsible. So as an investor, you look for those companies that can take their corporate responsibility, and that is actually while making their money. Not afterwards.
And then Carl, also you sort of being a thought leader within, what would you say, well, both maybe towards the need of this transparency to really ensure that the sustainability is part of the core of the business. How do you see that speaking to clients and organizations?
I think the disclosures, it has to probably be audited and standardized, and now we will of course get the taxonomy where people or companies will report in an equal way, and that will of course make it much more easier to have that transparency compared to if investors have to read and interpret sustainability reports that are really written in many different ways, so very difficult to kind of weed out what is what. So taxonomy for sure will help transparency.
And also, I mean, looking at measurements, which I know is part of your expertise, and also what Optilon is creating those kind of tools. Is the market is now ready for measurements? And to tell us a bit more about Sustainify and how that really is, an independent way to measure corporate impact.
Well, there is, like you're saying, the taxonomy is coming from the EU, where we will standardize the E and S and G in ESG, so for environmental, social, and governance issues. And I think that's a huge help because it will make investors able to compare on the same issues. Right now, it's a jungle out there, but I think it's broader than just the ESG. What we're rating on is the corporate social responsibility. So we actually want those companies that do the responsible part, because you can have a high ESG score without actually being that responsible, because they get credit for donations and all these other things after they make their money. So there's a little bit of a difference there where we are focusing on the responsibility part.
Alice, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I would like to add to the transparency dialogue that you both mentioned here, that to me or to Optilon, it's also a very vital part of the supply chain sustainability journey, because transparency also means that you somehow have to democratize the sustainability trade-offs. It's not just about cost, it's also about emission to serve. So all those, you could say, trade-offs, as we call them, you have to have, systems or at least the processes that helps the different decision makers to make these trade-offs. And that's what I think will prepare the companies to be more transparent, to have more visibility in the decisions they make.
Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. And I just want to add to democratizing actually will help transparency, but also innovation. As soon as you share data, people will see ideas and opportunities at different levels in an organization. So definitely.
And it's also acquiring this mindset of not only problem solving, but actually solution orientated.
Yes.
And to sort of, we need to educate, because at the moment we talk a lot about sustainability, but we might not at the core in our own companies know how to really fuse that into the business operations.
No. Yeah, a key word is collaboration. If we
Yes.
don't reach outside our organizations and collaborate, we will not be able to make those radical innovations that are required. Then we'll still, going with maybe, in production companies, the old good ways of producing and, sending out and not really thinking about the consequences. So collaboration is key. I guess that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's more and more, because in the circular economy as well, if we want, they say that waste is just a resource in the wrong hands. And to be circular, we have to find partnerships with people that can use waste to make them into a resource where they are recirculated again and upcycled. And that, I think, will come more and more. You have to be able to build these kind of networks around these nodes of,
building nodes of networks indirectly. And I think collaboration, just as purpose and sustainability, all of these are sort of getting intertwined to really finding this holistic, circular, not only economy, but way of merging companies and so forth. I wanted to invite our viewers and do a poll just quickly. So if you can take up a poll too, because it's also interesting to see, does your company have a sustainability goal? I mean, just to sort of see what we're on par with, and a very easy answer is yes, no, or other. Because I also know while our viewers are looking at this, an MIT report that you showed me, Alice, where it shows there that 52% do have a goal, which of course is maybe not enough, but at least we're going in the right direction. And looking here, it seems that it's a bit more, yes. So 64% do have a sustainability goal, and maybe more will after our discussion. But just to sort of get a temperature of who we have in our viewers. But speaking of sustainability, I mean, it has so many more dimensions than just looking at sort of the environmental aspect, which of course is a heavyweight one, so not to sort of eliminate that. But there are also different objectives like water scarcity. There's also the way our company is willing to, pay a higher price and so forth. And I thought, Carl, could you sort of navigate us a bit what your experience is there?
It's a tricky one, because someone has to move in front and lead the way and develop good solutions that are more sustainable. So, I mean, one favorite example I read about recently is Boliden. And they mapped the carbon footprint of their copper production, and they found it's 1.5 kilos per kilo of copper. And then compared to 4 kilos of conventional copper. So they are really leader in sustainable copper mining. But they said it's difficult for them to put the premium price, because the commodity is traded on a spot market. But the people using the copper in the next step, like for electric cars, they need 8 times more copper in an electric car than a conventional car. If we want to be truly carbon neutral, we have to be prepared to pay for also good raw material in these cars. It's not enough to just drive around in your electric car and feel good about it, because,
And I'd like to add in there, because on that topic, there's a little bit of a dilemma. A lot of people think that the consumers out there, they will not pay for sustainable products. But that is not true, at least according to an MIT report. Actually, from 2019 to 20, it raised by 7 times that consumers will actually be willing to buy sustainable products. So there's a real dilemma there, also for supply chain leaders or business leaders in general, to really have the courage to go out there and do the change inside their companies, so that there are sustainable offerings.
But I also think it's for the politicians to dare to price bad things, like you said, emission to serve. I think that's an excellent KPI, because then, I mean, of course, it should cost to emit, and then those people with low emissions will have favors in the market, of course. But also internally in companies, we can start to price behaviors that we don't want to see. Like, why not we price emissions internally when we do like investment analysis, for example? So, yeah, we need to also walk the talk if we want to be carbon neutral or whatever the sustainability target is.
I think it's a very valid point, and it also shows, I mean, we talk of nodes of networks, but it also shows that all the stakeholders need to be part of this discussion. You have the regulatory and legislation that sometimes doesn't have the capacity to go as quickly as technology, and then you have the companies. So it's really interesting to sort of put that into perspective, and I presume a way, at least for companies, looking at you, and it's talk a bit more about, for example, I mean, exemplifying using Optilon as an example to really try and showcase the tools that are already here that can also maybe be utilized.
Yeah. I will give a very pragmatic example. If you're a company and you need to source, let's say, a chair, and you have to make a decision, should it be in India that this chair should be sourced, or should it be in Portugal? Now, typically what you would do is you would do a cost comparison. Maybe you will even add the total supply chain cost. But what you really need to make a decision here is also the CO2 emissions. So there are tools out there that can actually help you build scenarios and model that, and even democratize it in your company. And what do I mean by democratizing? As basically, if you have a company with, let's say, 800 sourcing professionals, what you do is you have your app, and you can actually use this behind the stage, so to say, models to daily, hourly, minutely model the decisions you have to take, and provide the, so to say, insight to make the right decisions. So that's what I mean by democratizing, and these tools are already available. But as John also said on stage here regarding the unnecessary report, that's also a good example of that. You, with the right supply chain planning tools, you can really do a lot. It doesn't have to be that complicated. So bring it down to earth. We even also have standardized AI solutions that you can do it in even a lower scale. So yeah.
So could one say that would it be advisable to couple that, for example, with an impact measurement tool, if that's what I can say? Is that sort of the best way to optimize?
I think tools like that will actually help in the reporting. And that's what investors look at, and it will help with transparency as well. So this will help the whole reporting issue and transparency in that sense. So I think more tools like that could actually be a good way to aid sustainability in supply chain.
And I wanted to get back a bit to resilience. We sort of tapped into it already, but we've talked a lot about it in the conference so far. I mean, what would be your specific advice? How do we really build in, resilient supply chains? Looking at, the geopolitical, the environmental catastrophes and so forth. What are sort of the key components that companies and leaders need to think about here? Anyone who wants to catch that ball, Carl?
No, but I think the audience that we have here in this broadcast, they were quite spot on in the poll here before the break, because, I mean, mapping of the external risks is, of course, very important. And then you also have to consider sustainability risks like climate. If you're in an area which is prone to flooding, of course, then your operations is threatened if events of extreme weather will be more and more common. And then you maybe need to reconsider, do you take mitigation effects to avoid or to mitigate the floodings, or do you move? If you're in an area where you have water scarcity and you're a brewery, then of course, I mean, I think you should really consider to try to minimize water waste in such operation, or maybe you should be somewhere where access to water is better. But I think it's a lot about mapping those risks and then take measures to understand how climate and sustainability issues are impacting those risks.
It's nearly as though companies need, an internal and external sustainability advisor to sort of also be able to map all these things while you're also doing, having your business in motion. I wanted to once again include our viewers with a second poll just to ask, has your company received pressure to increase supply chain sustainability from, example, governments or investors, just to see if that is also something that's in motion. So the poll should be up in your browsers now, and let's see. Yep, there seems to be don't know. That's an interesting perspective, because that means the question hasn't even been on the table. So it's more between yes, don't know, and no.
Yeah, I could add in that also this MIT report that I highly recommend that you read is that in there it was also stated that the highest increase from 19 to 20 was this urge from investors and governments to really do something. So this pressure is known by a lot of the companies that were asked in this report.
Yeah. And it's sort of like we were talking about, this is an educational process, of course. I also want to talk about innovation, because innovation is also, the key to thriving in uncertainty and preparing for the future. So what would, out of whoever wants to sort of juggle the question, what types of innovations, we've heard a bit, are really needed to build both a resilient but also sustainable supply chain? Of course, it's depending on the sector, but still, what are sort of the key components, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I would call it an innovation, but I think the supply chain and the people working in it will have an excellent opportunity here to be change makers, and because they know both the tactical and strategic importance and their sort of like landscape and behind. So they have every opportunity here to really make a difference, and I think they should take on that seat and make the change within the company. Of course, powered by top management, and I think that's what's going to create the innovation.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I see something like being proactive is going to be super key for any company in the near future when it comes to sustainability. It's all about being able to be proactive and not wait until you get some kind of regulation that forces you to act on something. And then, of course, the collaboration, I see partnership to be something that's going to be key in innovation in the future. I would love to see companies that maybe don't see themselves as competitors, but if you share the same type of supply chain, why not join forces and do good? You're gonna meet the same climate change challenges and other sustainability challenges. And I think if you join forces to mitigate your risks as a company, I think that could be really interesting from an investor's point of view.
Very valid point. And Carla, you're at Alfa Laval, but what would you say, I mean, maybe you don't know the whole sustainability strategy there, but what strategies are sort of in place just to exemplify how large companies work with it?
No, but for us, we help these guys meet the sustainability targets. As an example, we need a lot of energy. If we are going to drive electric cars and electrify and make clean hydrogen for the green steel up in the north of Sweden, the energy will not be enough. We will not be able to produce that much energy. We also need energy efficiency. So energy is another resource we have to use efficiently. And that could prove to be up to 40% of the savings we need in the Paris Accord, just to do investments in energy efficiency. And those are solutions that we provide. So there are many good Nordic companies that provide very good solutions that can help make the supply chain more sustainable. And we're just one of those nice Nordic companies. So I think
doing the work,
it's a business opportunity for us. But we also have to set our own house in order.
Of course. And just to summarize, if we would sort of look, because time is accelerating in the world, if we just look 5 years forward and just look at the top 3 companies who are really driving a sustainable, resilient agenda, let's say, the top tier companies, in supply chain or in any other sector, just to paint a picture of what this sort of role model company or strategy would look like? What would each of you say, just very brief and short?
What about Alfa
Yeah,
Laval?
yeah, of course. I mean, I truly believe. I mean, I love to work for that company because of what we do for the planet. But if I can't say us, then but I will anyway. But then I would say Maersk is a very good example of like, we need to have decarbonized ships. So what do? We build 6 vessels running on methanol. We don't have the fuel yet, but we figure out someone will supply it with us if we order the ships. So I think Maersk is a very good example of someone who dares to take big decisions to move the agenda forward.
Eva?
I don't know. I would like to see companies do more like Ørsted did, the energy company, Danish energy company. They did a huge transition of their business model, where they went from black energy, like oil and coal, primarily, into green energy. And I want to see more of those. I want to see business models change. In the next 5 years.
Yeah. I'm quite inspired actually by startups. They can as well bring in new ways of doing things, new business model types that really can inspire the big companies. So there isn't just one company for me that's doing the right stuff. It also depends on what part of the, so to say, CSR agenda or the sustainability agenda we're talking about. Some companies are good with the social aspects, some good companies are good at the environmental, and some do other stuff. So it's difficult.
But sort of summarizing and listening to what you're saying, what we also see in the real world is really, which startups have a lot of as well, is this mindset of not just looking at the problem, but actually visualizing the solution and then gearing towards that, which is Mars both are great examples of. And I think that's the kind of mindset that we need today. Thank you so much for taking part of the panel and for your expertise in everything that you do. Stay safe and healthy as well. And with that, we're now going to transition to our next section and next talk, and that is about digital twin. Now, the growing momentum around system-based thinking in supply chain planning has given rise to this concept of digital twin. And you can think of a digital twin as a what-if scenario. What if that, because that allows you then to make accurate test of the resilience of a complex multi-ethelon and global supply chain. Now, companies that utilize the digital capacities of supply chain planning will be much more resilient, which is what we've been talking about, and also better equipped to really handle challenges and disruption, as well as competing more effectively. But what does this mean in practical terms, and how can a digital twin be an enabler? Well, this is what our next topic is about, and our eminent speaker who's going to talk about this is Manuel Mayhofer, who is business analyst and project manager at SKF Group, and he's here to talk about this. So I say a warm welcome to Manuel, joining us via link. Manuel, I hand over the word to you.
Thank you very much for the warm welcoming, Sabine. I'm very excited to be here today, even though not on site, and with also all the other colleagues here. I would like to. Can you see the slides? Perfect. So, okay, I'm very glad to talk about our end-to-end planning with the digital twin. So I wanted to start about who we are. We are SKF. We are a truly global company with over 40,000 employees working in over 130 countries and acting in 103 manufacturing units and serving 17,000 different locations. So we are a big and complex company. But how can we remain resilient and agile in such a big network and in every node? And this is what I'm going to talk about today. And how can we remain our SKF's vision and mission, a world of reliable rotation, and to remain the undisputed leader in the bearing business. We have already heard quite some things about uncertainty, and I would also like just to quickly phrase around here a bit. Corona has changed our ways of working. It changed how companies be. It can be that the company needs to stop its production lines. Semiconductors put production lines of automotive companies on stop. So there are a lot of demand fluctuations, which it is quite hard to assess if you do not have the right tools and processes in place. And we do think these are a key method in order to safeguard service levels, stock optimization, and efficient planning. And I would like to continue here with a statement from Bill Gates. Like a human being, a company has to have an internal communication mechanism, a nervous system to coordinate its actions. And this is very true for us in SKF. We have our digital twin in place, which acts as our nervous system, coordinating and controlling all of our logistical and supply chain activities and production planning. But what is the digital twin, you might wonder? The digital twin for us is a relational database. So it is basically the representation of all our supply chain processes in a digital world. And the nice thing about the digital twin is that it is our single source of truth of more than 500,000 stock keeping units, over 5 systems and 40 installations. And we gather data and consolidate all of that data of our master data, so about all of our different production sites, warehouses, lead times, and much more. And also about our transactional data, each and every order from our customers, our replenishment order, stock movements, everything is mapped into our digital twin and acts as our nervous system. So how did we start? We started our run in 2015. And as you might imagine, this is not a short sprint. It is actually a marathon we're running, and we are still in it. So we started our journey 2015. Here you can see a simple depiction of a supply chain. Might not be too complicated for our supply chain audience. It looks simple here, but we came from a different situation, and it was that we put the most intelligent people from our supply chain organizations and also from Optilon and Tools Group in here and came up with a solution. We started off with node-based planning. So in each of those warehouses which you see on here, we had one person sitting planning one specific stream. So imagine one person sitting in Argentina planning a specific product for some customers, and another person sitting in China planning the same product, and then being it propagated to the factory. As you might imagine, it is sub-optimization. It creates friction between the regions and does not allow us to act on a global optimum, which prevents us in serving the customers in the best way. And this is why we came up with another solution as integrated planning, which is our operational end-to-end planning. And one production planner, global planner, now does the planning for the full chain of his or her assortment and takes the full stock ownership and service ownership and has the full visibility of the whole chain. And this was the starting point and is the backbone of our further demand chain processes, which are also powered by our digital twin and serves as a source for all of that. What is different now with this? I mean, sales and operations planning, we had it like already probably like 20 years ago, but it was like a lot of flood of emails and Excel files being exchanged and about demand and supply constraints. But the difference now is we have tools in place where a person, for example, sitting in China, knowing about a wind facility being built or a subsidy for the industry being provided could result in more bearing sales. And this we enter in the systems, and just simply with a click of a mouse, we can deploy this operationally throughout all of our systems for more than 400 stock keeping units within 1 day. And this is propagated from the very end of our distribution system through all of our lanes, what we saw before, and then also into the production planning through master production scheduling, materials requirements planning, and then automatically sending this to our suppliers. So we have a full end-to-end integration in that matter. As mentioned, integrated planning is our end-to-end operational tool, which serves as a prerequisite for us. So we use S&OP input more from a strategical dimension, but also each and every planner, production planner, is able to provide his human intelligence and adjust our forecasts and acts on our nervous system. And we did not want to stop within our company boundaries. This is why we introduced vendor managed inventory. Now integrating further downstream to our distributors and OEMs, meaning we manage their stock, we manage their replenishment orders, so we provide additional service for them. But what we especially do is we create more transparency and are more customer centric and can act faster if disruptions or changes on the demand market occur. And this information is then again directly linked to our integrated planning and to our backbone. And as you might imagine, there is a lot of communication going back and forth. And we also thought emails are maybe not the best means of that. This is why we have operational workflows. Assume that you have a person sitting in the United States in customer service and wondering when some product could be made available for a specific customer. Previously, you would search up some email addresses. But now you simply add your product in the workflow. All the other information is automatically pre-populated, and then it is sent to the correct person. For example, a production channel planner sitting here with me in Steyr, and then being able to answer and being automatically sent back. And this within less than 24 hours. And what we additionally have nowadays, especially important, is where demand is relatively high and not in each and every facility we can fulfill this demand. We need to act on some limits in order to still provide the highest customer value and prioritize. This is done based on algorithms and forecast quotas. And if more is needed in a specific forecast, then we accept orders later, making it possible for us to prioritize our consumers' demand. Then additionally, in regard to S&OP, we have also a short-term dimension, the sales and operations execution, where we assess if deviations occur, and if this is the case, we trigger workflows in order to guarantee that the right people look at it, investigate it, and if it depicts a problem, an abnormal demand or so, we can enter this in our nervous system and trigger all the actions throughout the supply chain. Additionally, we also have Power BI business intelligence reports, monitoring all of these steps here, providing information to top management, but also to each operation. And it is truly interconnected. A top manager could send a question about the KPI or a screenshot to, for example, a factory supply chain manager here and ask, why is this KPI off? And then they could simply answer and check this by drilling through, investigating, and then providing an answer and solution to the problem. As this might sound all nice and easy, it wasn't. We have gathered several lessons learned on our way of establishing our digital twin and these processes around. One especially important point for us is a controlled playground. What do we mean with that? It is that you have test environments and you do not have to establish like the best software solution or planning solution from the beginning. You can try something and it can also fail. It doesn't need to be always the best it can be, because otherwise it would take you forever to deploy something and create something. Additionally, I would like to highlight that we need to deploy to users and not just simply to systems. What's the difference? It is about what is the value of a specific tool or a software if no one knows how to use it or is not willing to use it. And this we enable with steadily being in touch with key user communities, they being in contact with the rest of the organization, and then asking for feedback loops in how we could even further improve. But this long journey also gives us benefits, business benefits, which we like to focus on. It is here a 10% reduction in finished goods stock, remaining the same service stock levels. And as mentioned, the speed improvement with our workflows so that we can act very fast from a customer order or a customer request and answer this extremely fast. Then cost efficiency. As you saw before, previously we had on all of those different nodes, different people sitting. And now we have one person planning this full chain, having created this global optimum and taken off a lot of sub-optimization. And by that, creating a 30% planning efficiency increase. Additionally, we have increased our forecast volume accuracy by 9% in the European region, making it easier for us to plan our production and also equipped better for service stock levels. But we are not at the end of our run. We still keep on running and towards a goal of further improving our supply chain resilience and efficiency. Along this way, we would like to further tackle some initiatives like process automation, downstream integration, to further look into how we could improve together with our customers in better understanding and customer demands to be faster in accelerating and breaking with our production so that we can guarantee best service with lowest stock possible. And further improving real time, as you saw before, we already have an hourly transmission of our data and are continuously working to get this even faster in order to also encourage process automation. And this was just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is then a full supplier integration as well. They already receive all of our demand information automatically and further propagated to them. But additionally, it would also reap benefits to understand uncertainties in their production and be aware of what's coming up and hitting us maybe in a few months down the road. I want to say thank you very much for having me here and giving the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuel, and thank you also for taking us on the journey of really understanding more the concept of digital twin. I have a few questions here from the audience, and one was, what are the typical barriers to adopting a digital twin?
One major barrier, I would say, is master data. Because you usually have master data, but then there is the question, who manages it? Is it, let's say, in a management attention? Usually it's seen as not providing so much value, but once you switch on an automation in your supply chain, you really fully need to rely on this, because you cannot say, that person anyways knows that it's not correct.
Okay.
This is, I would say, the major challenge. Huh?
Yeah.
No, good.
Thank you. And second question, how can end-to-end planning, an end-to-end planning approach add to the concept of a resilient supply chain?
I would clearly say, first of all, the speed, because you saw how many nodes we have. We have many networks, a big network and many data points and nodes in there. If each point would take you, I don't know, several days to communicate, you're really slow. For us, it is near real time. You get information from the very end to the production. And you can act and directly send this to the suppliers.
And this is sort of a question that maybe ties into that, but what is your best advice to supply chain managers who want to create an end-to-end planning approach? What should they sort of have top of mind?
I would say first, it needs a mapping of the supply chain, that you understand it, because without understanding, it is hard then to assess and establish a new kind of way of working like we did. We also had to plot out our distribution network and where is the stock and everything. And then you have the possibility to rethink the process. Could we streamline towards one dedicated planning? And it means planning dependent flows by one head in one entity, as it was for our case. One product is planned by one person, and that person has to have the full responsibility regarding service and stock.
Thank you, Manuel, for also answering those questions so eloquently and also for giving us such a great overview of the digital twin and for all the work that you do. So stay safe and healthy, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I also want to say thank you to all of our viewers. We aren't ending them, but for your energy and your presence and also for sending in questions. So do continue to send in questions using the chat function because we do have a few speakers left. I also wanted to say we're now going to have a leg stretcher, a quick break. This is just to give you time to get some coffee, tea, maybe answer an email or just reflect upon what has been said so far and how you can integrate this into your company. We'll be starting again at 3:15, and then we'll be diving into transformative supply chain management and also looking at how we retain, obtain, and also stimulate talent, because that is what is required more and more as technology emerges into our companies. We need additional talent to be able to take care of that. Now, to keep you engaged during the break, I'm going to give you one last poll that you can consider during the break. And the poll should be coming up in your browser now. And it is, which barriers do you have in your company in regards to improving your company's supply chain resilience? So keeping to that core of resilience. So think about that, and we'll look at the answers when we're back from the break. And as I said, we'll see you here again live 3:15.
How I lived was how I should. I never took the time to lay my heart on the line. Play it safe, play it cool, keep it calm. Never strayed too far from that line. I never listened to the words that were written in your songs. I've been waiting on you right now for so long, and I've been living through you right now for so long. And if I told you why I came to you right now, would you call me all the time right now for so long? Here goes the bass of my heart. It's your word and affections. Oh, can you take me as I am? Here goes the bass of my heart. It's your word and affections. Oh, can you take me as I am? And I've been working it through right now for so long. No words or dreams will ever prove what I feel for you. And if I told you why I came to you right now, would you take me as I am right now for so long? Here goes the bass. Here was your name again? I've seen so many of them come. Want me just play pretend? All your girls, they just wanna have fun. But it's the same old thing that we all see. The same old thing that keeps me keen. But I just wanna be alone with you. Just wanna be alone with you. The same old thing that keeps me around. If you wanna come around, maybe it's cool. And if you wanna fuck around, maybe I do. Just wanna be alone with you. With you. With you. With you. Just wanna be alone.
Slowly dying. Now you don't stay. I'd have done things a little better, but you would still be here when I call. 'Cause you would still be here when I call.
So, welcome back to the live studio broadcast of Optilon's Supply Chain Conference. So, we're now going to transition into a new topic, and that is transformative supply chain management. But before I introduce our speaker for this, let's take a look at the poll that I posed before the break and see what your answers. Now, the question was, which barriers do you have in your company in regards to improving your company's supply chain resilience? And that there were a variety of options. Let's see if we can get it up here. And it seems like most long lead times, lack of transparency, lack of concrete tools and approach are sort of the key metrics here. And hopefully today, with the speakers that we've had and the conversations and topics that we've raised, that some of these might actually be less barriers after this, or at least some kind of insight of how you can approach these different varieties or lacks that are currently existing. Now, global supply chains can often be complex, which I know all of you watching are probably very aware of. But could supply chains be fundamentally more different than we often imagine? Well, our next speaker, Andreas Wieland, an associate professor of supply chain management at the Copenhagen Business School, challenges the conventional assumptions we have about supply chains and supply chain management. And he provides transformative solutions to future-proof supply chains in an era that we're in, an era of crisis. So we're very excited to welcome Andreas Wieland to talk about this important topic of transformative supply chain management. So Andreas, welcome, and I hand over the word to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for introducing me, and also for organizing this great conference. So greetings from Copenhagen. So what I'm doing today is really talking to you about transformation in the sense also that we have heard in some of the presentations before. So but what I also would like to highlight is to be really transformative and to create a supply chain that transitions from an old business model maybe to a new one. We really need to reimagine. We need to rethink how things are, and even the supply chain. So this is what I will present today and discuss with you. And I think if you look at this picture, and some of you have seen it before in the news, it is from the wildfires in California. This represents very much that we need to transform when we look at the environmental crisis that are around us. I could have taken other pictures, for instance, in Germany recently, the floodings. And if you just think about Germany for a while, I mean, it's not a Mediterranean country, but we see 4 years of drought now in a row. Often we talk, also during the COVID pandemic, we have been talking about how vulnerable supply chains are. And these are incredibly important discussions. So we really need to discuss how can we ensure that this vulnerability of supply chains is coped with robustness, resilience. And that was also really well covered before. But what we have sometimes overlooked, or what we all know, but we are not talking about enough probably, is that supply chains are not just vulnerable systems, but they are also harmful systems. Because much of what we see around the globe in terms of the climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, is the result of global supply chains, of operations that occur in global supply chains. Much of the emissions that we create nowadays are located in global supply chains. So this is something we really need to think about and keep in mind also. So supply chains don't always behave like the systems we believe they are. So what I present on the left side here is, this is really a Danish perspective now. Metro Copenhagen. I could have taken Tunnelbana in Stockholm also, or any other subway system on our planet. This is an engineered system, and very often in our textbooks also we compare intuitively supply chains with engineered systems. So if you look into a supply chain textbook nowadays, you will often see a picture of a small supply chain. On the left side, maybe the raw material supplier. On the right side, the end consumer. And in the middle, then the first tier, the second tier, wholesalers, retailers, etc. So on paper, supply chains are often depicted almost like metro systems. this like engineered systems. And it makes sense at first glance. We look at the systems from outside. So we're standing in a subway station looking at the map on the wall, but we sometimes also look at our own supply chains. Maybe we have created it, printed it out, and now we can see who are our first tier, second tier suppliers, which is of course very complex in a real world. But is that really the right picture? And now I show you an alternative here. This is a forest. It's an ecological system. It's not an engineered system. So it's not created by a designer. It has emerged. It has adapted over time. It has transformed over time. Things are changing. And if you think about it, it might be closer to what a supply chain actually is, because now you're in the forest. And if all trees here represent suppliers or suppliers of suppliers, then we can see the close ones. That's maybe our first tier suppliers, but we can't really see where the supply chain ends. So it's it's a complex system. It's a dynamic system, one where we're in the middle of the system. So it's not this bird's perspective like on the left side, where engineers can like analyze the supply chain entirely, have a perfect picture of it, but it is this imperfect system that is depicted on the right side. So why is ecological thinking maybe helpful in transformation? I want to show you how in the automotive industry, this adaptive thinking, like the forest, emerging over time, changing over time, can help us maybe to understand supply chains and how they have developed over time. So 3 quotes I will present to you. The first one comes from Toyota, from Akio Toyoda, so the CEO of that company. He said it only last year, and you might be surprised how what he said back then, only 1 year ago. He said, when politicians are out there saying, let's get rid of all cars using gasoline, do they understand this? The current business model of the car industry is going to collapse. So what he obviously has in mind is, like an engineer, you try to stabilize the supply chain, you try to keep things as they are, the business model even, you try to ensure that the engine that was built, the combustion engine, will also exist in the future, like the metro grid would exist in the future. So there's a second quote coming from Herbert Diess, CEO of Volkswagen. He also said it last year. And you can see that his thinking is one step further in terms of transformation. He said, Nokia is probably a good example of how such a change can happen. So from combustion engines to electric cars. If you're not fast enough, you're not going to survive. I'm always telling our people this example. So that company seemed to recently have really, with that CEO also, really understood that there is a fast transition that is needed now on the market, and otherwise they will go extinct, essentially. The last quote, you will not be surprised, comes from Tesla. Elon Musk said,